Any non-adherence to objective value in creative design is tantamount to artistic suicide. Fundamentally, the progressive types know that this is true, and anyone who denies their belief in objective value will still adhere to some form of objectivity. This is regardless of any insistence to the contrary. These days, however, the progressive types will call their adherence to an objective value media literacy, and they are prone to becoming incensed when anyone deviates from media literacy as a standard. If one cannot talk about objective reality without using words that directly pertain to objective reality, then other words will be found. This all must be kept in mind when anyone remarks on someone else's media literacy. Adherence to media literacy is a demand for compliance to specific modes of thoughts and feelings when it comes to media analysis, regardless of the fact that this flies directly in the face of the everything is subjective worldview. And this is at the root of all the frustrations expressed by the YouTuber Th3Birdman, as he addresses the content perpetuated by the YouTuber, the critical drinker. This is regardless of whatever intent that Birdman asserts as motivates his responses to critical drinker. Birdman's video is essentially a demand. Birdman, jealous of a performer he deems of lesser intelligence than he is, made a video bemoaning the fact that the subjective opinion of a drunken Scottish YouTuber personality is not consistent with his vapid current year mindset, his media literacy. With my video here, I'm going to run through several things said by Birdman, showing that most of what he says is contradictory and largely consists of his own projections, including, funnily enough, his own accusations of projection. I'll begin by saying Birdman is another one of these enlightened centrists. Unlike short fat otaku, however, Birdman is really bad at hiding his progressive tendencies. And funnily enough, despite his alleged apolitical worldview, he becomes really talkative when right-wingers start to win. Birdman begins this video essay talking about the illusory truth effect, and he does this even before he starts telling his audience about what he supposedly believes in. I say supposedly because I can take or leave most of this.
The illusory truth effect is a phenomenon that was first detailed in a 1977 study. It's the inclination of people to believe false information after being exposed to that false information many times. Repeated exposure to lies caused the false information to feel familiar to the participants. In that study, they found out that the more familiar the information feels, the more likely that familiarity overpowers a person's rationality. This is a powerful psychological tool that grifters employ on their audience, and its effects are seen every single day. How many times have you heard vaccines cause autism or go woke, go broke? There is a reason these people repeat these mantras over and over, even in the face of conflicting evidence, and that's because repeating false information makes it more likely to be believed. What's up, everyone? It's your friendly neighborhood Birdman here. Today, I'm going to question why people believe this grifter and show you precisely why you shouldn't. Due to the kinds of people this video is sure to attract, I think I need to put my cards on the table. Firstly, I am not a political type. I rarely, if ever, bring up politics, and when I do, it's usually to make fun of them, left or right. For this behavior, I have been routinely called right-wing and left-wing by people who make politics their entire identity. My position is that political folk are mirror images of each other participating in the Spider-Man meme, where they blame each other for doing exactly what they themselves are doing, something the drinker is heavily guilty of.
Birdman is talking about himself, and talking about yourself is the most biased action anyone can take. And yes, that will be ironic later because he insists he's all about reason and facts and science and math. But his talking about himself here runs against his projected understanding about illusory truth. What I mean by that is that Birdman's self-description necessarily relies on his audience simply believing what he says, taking it at face value, rather than allowing his audience to come to their own conclusions about whatever he says based on the arguments that he presents.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
This is no different than beginning your commentary with the phrase, "Trust me, bro." This just makes me think that you're lying because people whose goal is to set the record straight on something or want to keep their audience's eyes on the prize would just go straight into their commentary and create a tautology by which their audience can discern what is true and what is not for themselves. Instead, what Birdman is doing is establishing a parasocial relationship with his audience. "Oh, you know me so well. I would never lie to you. I don't believe in X, Y, and Z. So if you think that's what's going on, based on anything I say, you're wrong. Stop thinking for yourselves, and think about this the way I tell you to." Now, Birdman has the tendency to boast about his IQ, his intelligence, a whole lot. Therefore, I assume that he thinks his general audience is not as discerning as he is. So he has to tell them exactly what they are supposed to think about what he says before he even says it. And the problem with all of this is that this is still guiding people based on their emotions, not their intelligence. Think about it. If a guy spends the first few minutes of a video telling you what thoughts and feelings you ought to have before you've heard any arguments at all, what is he appealing to? He does this on several occasions throughout the video as well, particularly when he takes an aside to talk about Nick Fuentes, and he front-loads that commentary by immediately asserting a interjection before he said anything about Fuentes in general. This all counts on the emotional and gut reactionaries in his audience rather than anyone capable of intellectual discernment. So why, Birdman, do you promote your intellect while you also rely on these appeals to the emotions of your audience?
The only side I'm on is reason, logic, facts, science, and math. So believe me, when I criticize this very obviously right-wing chud, I'm doing so out of the spirit and integrity of unbiased media discourse, which is something I care about deeply. Less important, but still worth the mention, I'm not doing this out of jealousy or an attempt to clout chase. I've been calling out a much bigger YouTuber for nearly 7 years. For me, this is simply calling out another bad critic.
Many of these online personalities establish a parasocial relationship with their audiences before they talk about anything in their videos. This adds unearned substance to whatever they say, in which case you may find you're compelled to agree with whatever they say by default, regardless of how well-reasoned their arguments are.
I think it's silly to adhere to political sides because at some point in time, you're going to have to defend nonsense to maintain the integrity of being on that side.
Adhering to politics is a basic practice for any everyday common citizen in most first world countries. After all, we do live in a world governed by the state, and the state is run by politicians whose policies are based about substantive axioms. And in the digital world, politics has become psychopolitical, to borrow a phrase from Byung-Chul Han. Let me establish a working definition moving forward, just in case anyone tends to get confused or frustrated when anyone talks about politics. Politics is any method by which people act that is sufficient enough to change an established social order. In which case, if you do run a large YouTube channel and you are pushing for any substantive change, then saying you are not political is by nature contradictory. I mean, for what reason does your influencer YouTube channel exist other than to influence? And if you address politics under this definition, a lot of things start to make sense. And depending on the scale of various movements of influence, we therefore attribute names to those movements. Conservative or liberal are good examples, and less substantive examples are alt-right or Antifa. One of the primary reasons why people assert that they are apolitical, however, is because they are statists. They are comfortable enough with the current established order that they are obliged to disinvite any change to it. This as opposed to the everything is political crowd who want to revolutionize everything. And this is why many will have appropriately regarded people like Birdman or Short Fat Otaku as leftists or statists, regardless of their protestations. While they may think that they're above the confines of a political struggle, they are essentially in favor of the status quo, which is governed by the progressive left. And this is also why when any of these centrist types are pushed on their beliefs, they will default to the extreme left. Many of these centrists are controlled opposition, and we know this in part because they are constantly obliged to push back against social change by otherwise adhering to the current political regime. And they are statists insofar as their rhetoric is in favor of the progressive state and many of its modern institutions. And the bulk of their rhetoric will pivot on the axis of bigotry. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, that's something I explained in my video Diversity is a Moral Mandate. To briefly summarize, we live amidst a fifth republic, which was established by the Civil Rights Act.
Aaron McIntyre and the guys from the Good Old Boys podcast suggest that we're now living in a fifth republic. The first person I heard criticize the Civil Rights Act was Rand Paul. Then I saw Pastor Doug Wilson echoing those criticisms. But until I read Christopher Caldwell's book, The Age of Entitlement, I didn't realize how much it had transformed the country. Caldwell argues that they had inadvertently voted themselves a second constitution without explicitly repealing the one they had. Each constitution contained guarantees. But the Civil Rights Act made it the job of the government to root out inequality, which means rooting out bias. What we call political correctness is the natural outcome of civil rights, which makes fighting bias a condition for the legitimacy of the state. Once bias is held to be part of the unconscious of human nature, there are no areas of human life in which the state's vigilance is not called for. So this is the republic we live in now, and whatever you call it, it's not the 1789 constitutional order.
This means that the only metric for good and evil in much of the Western world is your capacity for bigotry. As such, everyone who is a statist will inevitably obsess over various isms like racism or sexism. The reason for this obsession is because they know state power is invested in rooting out all biases, and so they will repeatedly insist on their own victimhood, while simultaneously bludgeoning anyone who dares challenge the status quo. And what has often been said about people like this is that if they lived in Germany in 1933, they would readily align themselves with the dominant political party. Now, if our lives are defined by our struggle against rulers, authorities, and the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms, then of course this Fifth Republic, which is currently manifested by the progressive state, is in fact the enemy of humanity.
The only side I'm on is reason, logic, facts, science, and math. So believe me, when I criticize this very obviously right-wing chud, I'm doing so out of the spirit and integrity of unbiased media discourse, which is something I care about deeply.
Well, there you see, he told us that he cares about this stuff deeply. Therefore, he must be telling the truth, right? You just need to tell your audience that you're a good person, and that you care about whatever you're talking about, and like magical fairy dust, it gives substance to whatever you say next. No, we're about 3 minutes into his video at this point, and all he's been doing so far is building himself up. As far as I know, Drinker never does this. Drinker just goes straight into talking about a movie or whatever the topic is. But Birdman is unable to create such a tautology, and therefore he needs to tell you what to think. And that means putting you into a receptible state of mind. But this is short-sighted because Birdman essentially runs his own channel by the same playbook as Drinker does. It's all psychopolitical, made to create a bastion for the culture warriors in one's audience. What you need to watch out for here is any rhetoric that attends to this notion that the commentator is somehow being attacked by both sides.
I have been routinely called right-wing and left-wing by people who make politics their entire identity.
This is another trust me bro statement used to make one think that the speaker is completely neutral and unbiased. And Birdman does this to disarm his audience. And he must disarm his audience lest his arguments fail to hold up.
My position is that political folk are mirror images of each other participating in the Spider-Man meme, where they blame each other for doing exactly what they themselves are doing, something the Drinker is heavily guilty of.
This is a fallacy also adhered to by people like Short Fat Otaku. The idea here is that being apolitical affords you some kind of enlightened state of mind free from the constraints of a political dichotomy. Once again, Birdman is relying on his own illusory truth effect well into place at this point. That being that dissociation from political affiliation somehow makes one more enlightened. And as I mentioned before, this is a fallacy because the progressive state holds power right now. Adamantly standing against any change to the status quo inherently favors the powers that be, the progressive left. Projection also colors most everything Birdman says in this video. Insofar as he has a short list of isms to throw into a commentary in lieu of actual argumentation, he himself continually slips into establishing his own sets of biases. And that's also part of his own illusory truth effect. While being biased against anyone who adheres to party politics, he simultaneously claims to be unbiased. At the root of most of these issues is a lack of education and a repeated utilization of a party rhetoric. Call your opponents racist enough times until it sticks. Birdman also has no clear concept of what politics are or what being unbiased means. And to that I will not even attribute ignorance. This is malice. Not only does he not understand what he's talking about, he doesn't care. Lying works for him, and so he continues to do so. YouTube rewards him for it, so why should he stop?
That out of the way, it's difficult to know where to even start with this guy. He is absolutely rich with misinformation, outright lies, and baffling takes that don't stand up to even an ounce of scrutiny.
So why specifically say the word misinformation rather than say critical drinker is lying, or perhaps simply mistaken? Need it be said that the term misinformation has become a very politically charged word in recent years? I would reckon if you wanted to downplay your adherence to politics that you would change your language in such a way that you don't start to sound like you're parroting mainstream talking points. But that is illusory truth. Just keep saying misinformation like you've heard on the mainstream news over and over again until it sticks.
In my last video, I played an excerpt from his infamous Across the Spider-Verse video.
Also, I can't shake the feeling that the script is doing everything in its power to play down Peter Parker, like it's afraid the audience will somehow start rooting for him over Miles if he's shown to be too capable and confident. The first movie portrayed him as an aging, burned out loser who only redeems himself at the end, while the second film morphs him into a bumbling, hapless father in a pink bathrobe who for some reason keeps taking his baby along on life-threatening adventures despite having a perfectly capable mother at home to look after it. Is this some weird attempt to mock and belittle the Spider-Man that most people know and love, who incidentally just happens to be the only straight white man in the entire movie? I don't know, man, it just kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth, that's all.
The first thing you'll notice if you've seen that movie is that he's just blatantly incorrect. Peter B. Parker is not the only straight white male in the film. In fact, there are many of them, quite a few of them variants of Peter Parker himself. More importantly, there is a prominent supporting character that is the motivation for Spider-Gwen's entire arc.
Now, Drinker specifically said mock and belittle the Spider-Man that most people know and love. Everything that follows must be taken within that context. The most charitable interpretation here is that when Drinker says he is the only straight white male in the film, Drinker is implying that he is the only straight white male who matters, insofar as his role in the story goes. But the real problem with this analysis is that Drinker never marries himself to his own criticisms, and that's something Birdman completely overlooks. What Drinker is doing here is what is known as a seeming, which is not an argument. Listen specifically to what Drinker says here.
Is this some weird attempt to mock and belittle the Spider-Man that most people know and love, who incidentally just happens to be the only straight white man in the entire movie? I don't know, man, it just kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth, that's all.
That's where I would stick him to the wall on this. Is this happening or is it not happening, Drinker? And this is where the grift is really coming from, and Birdman completely misses it. Drinker did not make an argument here, and therefore this is not worth responding to. If anything, what Drinker is doing is planting a seed in the minds of his audience. But he didn't make any actual criticism here. The reason what Drinker is doing is dishonest is because you could ask yourself any questions pertaining to a seeming and nothing would change. For example, I could be like, Birdman uses the Blanca avatar from Street Fighter. Well, Street Fighter is a Capcom game. Is Birdman a Capcom shill? Is Capcom paying him money to promote their products? I don't know, man. It leaves a sour taste in my mouth. That is a fallacy. It is known as a seeming. And that's what Drinker is doing. He doesn't say the film is doing what it's doing, but he asks himself a question pertaining to the seeming, as if that adds legitimacy to it. But since he says he doesn't know, it just means he made no determinations and therefore no argument was made.
I don't know, man, it just kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth, that's all.
If no argument is made, no rebuttal is necessary.
The less obvious observation is that Will is a race baiter. The Spider-Verse films, while featuring a black protagonist, do not contain the themes of race relations.
Well, if a critical drinker is a race baiter, you took the bait.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Jokes aside, Birdman is projecting yet again. Whether or not Critical Drinker is race baiting by utilizing a talking point concerning Spider-Man's race still has nothing to do with the fact that Drinker never lands the criticism anyway. Let me assert something based on my own coverage of the Critical Drinker. Will Jordan is uncomfortable being straightforward about this topic and is indeed only addressing it because he knows that is what is expected of his channel. And again, this is just me being charitable. What I consider there, however, is the zeitgeist, which I talked about in my video. Diversity is a moral mandate. Online discourse is fraught with petty projections of power based on identity. The only group, however, who are not allowed to engage in such projections are white people. And that's key to understanding where Birdman is coming from. He really is not upset that Critical Drinker is race baiting because Birdman also engages in race baiting.
People from my own community, the black community, my own community, the black community, there is no such thing as race, the black community. There's the human race, the black community. Will is a race baiter, a black man and an Asian woman, respectively. Remember, I'm very scientifically minded. Like, this is my whole thing is science, facts, logic, reason, the black community. Oh, and math. Will is a race baiter, a black man and an Asian woman, respectively. In science, there's no such thing as different races. It's not a thing, okay? Will is a race baiter, a black man and an Asian woman, respectively. There's the human race, the black community. Will is a race baiter, a black man and an Asian woman, respectively. A different race means a different species. It's another word for a species. There's the human race, the black community. Will is a race baiter, a black man and an Asian woman, respectively. The species is what allows something to breed. There's the human race, the black community. Will is a race baiter, a black man and an Asian woman, respectively. So, for example, Poodle could theoretically mate with the black community.
The reality is, Birdman is upset because Drinker is race baiting on behalf of white people.
Will's goal with many of his film reviews is to galvanize his mostly male, mostly white, and mostly straight audience around the idea that they are being attacked for being those three things. There is no such thing as race. Mostly white. There's the human race. Mostly white. Phenotypical differences are a thing. Absolutely. Races are not. Mostly white. The more astute of you will then ask, well, why even bring that up at all? And therein lies the problem.
This is a fallacy known as rhetorical affirmation. It's like Critical Drinker making a seeming remark, but what characterizes this is that Birdman is asking an invisible audience a pointed question which he then answers.
The more astute of you will then ask, well, why even bring that up at all?
Rhetorical affirmations trick you into thinking that the speaker is smarter than he actually is. The speaker is creating a parasocial attachment under the premise that he is engaging with his audience.
Here he is doing the same thing to the Batman.
There seems to be a bit of a debate going on about whether or not this movie is woke, mainly because of the demographics of certain characters. And to be fair, there is a bit of evidence to support this claim. If I was a cynical man, I'd say it's kind of interesting that the rich, corrupt scumbags targeted by the Riddler all happen to be straight, white, middle-aged men. But hey, I guess that's just a total coincidence.
Seriously. What the fuck does this movie have to do with race?
Note that again, Drinker hasn't made an argument here. He mentions there is a debate going on. Okay, where? Among whom? There's no specifics. A bunch of children playing outside his house could be debating this for all we know, and it wouldn't make this statement any less true. Nevertheless, anything that follows is immaterial because it isn't even coming from Drinker. It's coming from some invisible debaters he referenced anecdotally.
And to be fair, there is a bit of evidence to support this claim.
What claim? Who made it? What is the exact basis for this claim? Birdman, the guy who says he cares so much about facts, won't ask these simple questions.
If I was a cynical man, I'd say it's kind of interesting that the rich, corrupt scumbags targeted by the Riddler all happen to be straight, white, middle-aged men. But hey, I guess that's just a total coincidence.
And that's as close to an assertion as you can get. But even there, Drinker made an addendum, which was that he would only say all this if he were a cynical man. So again, that isn't even an argument. Now, you could argue he's being coy with his language here, but that doesn't change the fact that at face value, he makes no argument and makes no appropriate assertion, and therefore one need not be obliged to rebut. However, Birdman continually activates Drinker's trap cards.
He has straight white men in his mouth so often you'd think he was an escort. If he applied even a little of that gray matter, maybe he'd come to the conclusion that most rich people in our society tend to be white men. The Riddler was going after police officers and politicians, and again, in our society, they tend to be white.
There is no such thing as race.
What Drinker is asking for here is diversity, but only amongst the villains of the film.
No, Drinker wasn't asking for anything. He anecdotally referenced an argument, talked about a claim which he didn't define, and made an assertion contingent on his hypothetically being a cynical man. Nevertheless, Birdman proceeds right into fact-check mode without any hindsight into the fact that part of the reason grift works is because people like Birdman scrutinize this as meticulously as he does. Birdman also makes direct reference to Wikipedia, which, as we know, can be edited by anyone and everyone. And Wikipedia even includes a disclaimer notifying you that it ought not be sourced academically.
Remember, I'm very scientifically minded. Like, this is my whole thing is science, facts, logic, reason.
In addition, regardless of previously asserting his apolitical stance, he specifically provides a picture of Republican politicians when he references white politicians.
I am not a political type. I rarely, if ever, bring up politics.
The problem with Birdman's approach is that even though he thinks he's attending to a con, he assumes the con is based in political ideology. In other words, he thinks Drinker is being inconsistent within his own rhetoric, when the fact of the matter is that Drinker is trying to play to more than one side. This is duplicitous. Birdman needs to realize that Drinker's previous spiel was less than definitive, and the reason for that was specifically to ensure that Drinker can't be pinned down to any pro-white stance. In that manner, Drinker can also be everything every viewer wants to see in him, and that, in part, is where the grift is. Now, what Birdman ought to acknowledge is that the world around him is fed up with the current weight of progressive ideology. Over the past few years, the progressive state cranked up the heat on the boiling frogs, and those side effects are coming to bear.
The West used to be more or less homogenous. Now it's not. And we're not going to have a politics that is everyone else votes in bloc, everyone else has ethnic identity except for people of European origin. That is not going to happen. And once they do start seeing themselves that way, that's going to trigger a whole heck of a bunch of other questions about the last 60 years and the ideology that got us here. And I would like to have that conversation in a way that minimizes harm and maximizes well-being for all races. But I don't think there's a way out of that conversation.
But this is essentially what Birdman's videos are, in addition to channels like Actual Fandom and those adjacent to them. This is all damage control. Damage control because nobody really has control over the narrative right now. Note this is why DEI and ESG initiatives are also going underground. Granted, they still exist, and the companies that utilize them as disciplines do so as a means of controlling their workforce. With that amount of power that these anti-racist disciplines afford them, they're not going to stop what they're doing. They've simply chosen to rebrand.
Listen to this incredible leap in logic for Godzilla vs. Kong.
And oh look, Kong's been abducted from his homeland and taken across the ocean to America in chains. I mean, there's on-the-nose writing, and then there's next-level stuff like this. I wonder who you're supposed to sympathize with here.
Yes, Drinker just called African slaves apes and tried to frame it as the screenwriters doing so. That, my children, is what we in the English-speaking world call projection.
The irony of utilizing the Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme is that one posting the meme never considers that he is also one of the Spider-Men. I'm also unclear as to what the whole refrain of
we in the English-speaking world call
adds to this commentary.
Projection.
Yes, projection is an English word, same as most of the rest of the words you just used.
In my last video, I showed a tweet by Drinker that I thought made it painfully obvious what his positions on black people in the media were. What I didn't account for was the insane mental gymnastics people would perform in order to deny that his post was racist in nature.
There is no such thing as race.
This is why the left can't meme. If taken at face value, Drinker's statement is the same as saying nothing at all. This is what is known as astroturfing. It is a very lucrative way of generating engagement on X because people there are almost completely reactionary. And even by responding to it, Birdman is playing right into Drinker's hands. And projection, which is what he accused Drinker of, is exactly what Birdman is resorting to here as he analyzes what Drinker says. Note that Drinker hasn't pointed out anything in particular in this image. For all anyone knows, he could be referring to the fact that the child in the picture is holding a small blue cube. And that cube looks very similar to the Tesseract from the Avengers series. And even by saying that, guess what I'm doing? I am projecting my own thoughts and feelings about what I assume Drinker is talking about on an image that contains many things. I talked about this regarding the petty shit-flinging going on X, which has been labeled Goonergate. An X profile named Pirate Nation posted a GIF without any context and asked an open-ended question about it. And without hesitation, various people on X started to respond to it. That is astroturfing. It works in a world where nobody thinks about what they're talking about, but everyone believes that they have to have an opinion about it. Remember when that pregnant nurse was being harassed by a bunch of trying to steal her bike? Yeah, before that whole incident was properly community noted, reactionaries on X had decided they knew exactly what had happened there. That is a prime example of astroturfing. Now, Birdman sees this picture and his attention is drawn to the woman, and he immediately projects his own racism onto Drinker, regardless of the fact that Drinker's comment is still extremely vague. There are a lot of things going on in this picture.
So I'll ask again. What do you honestly think Will's problem with this image was? Do you really believe he's this upset about Jason Momoa's character here?
Baited and hooked. This is how the internet works. Drinker is looking for engagement. He is looking for people to react to things that he posts, all the while saying as little as possible, and this taps into common sentiments without necessarily aligning himself with those sentiments.
So here's a tweet from a different person. If you're unfamiliar, this person is Nick Fuentes, a proud white supremacist.
There is no such thing as race.
Sounds contradictory, I know, what with being a Mexican and having a name like Fuentes while being a white supremacist.
There is no such thing as race.
But no one ever said white supremacists were intelligent.
Really? Okay, then I'll do it. White supremacists are intelligent. There, now someone said it.
The point is, doesn't this tweet seem to be placing emphasis on a specific character in the Minecraft movie? I mean, now that I've told you this person is a white supremacist, it's obvious what his issue is, isn't it?
This is astroturfing. They are baiting your responses and you feel obliged to respond. The actual grift is convincing people like Birdman to engage and respond, which he has done. None of what Drinker or Fuentes do is designed to change hearts or minds. This is all specifically designed to work simultaneously as an affirmation mantra for their viewers and a middle finger to their detractors. This is all tribal. And regarding it being tribal, even Birdman's own labeling, calling Fuentes a white supremacist, feeds into this. This works into Birdman's own grift. Birdman would rather you think Fuentes is a white supremacist, and therefore you dismiss whatever Fuentes says out of hand based on that labeling. And that's regardless to Birdman's previous supplication to
science, facts, logic, reason. Oh, and math.
Conservatives do this thing where they'll sit in a room, they'll watch a girl and a guy go into the other room, and they'll hear her screaming.
Birdman includes a clip of Steve Bunnell, aka Destiny, aka the Coomer Gremlin. There's no commentary from Birdman here, and since I'm not a mind reader, I won't even begin to guess what this has to do with his commentary about Critical Drinker.
One of the tactics of grifters and their parrots is to attempt to maintain an air of plausible deniability, so that when they are criticized for their bigotry, they can hide behind deflections. In my previous video, I brought up one of them, the "but Ripley from Alien" defense. In short, these people try to use examples that match or are similar to the identity of a group that they regularly target to pretend they are not prejudiced against that group. In political discourse, this is probably more well known as, "but I have black friends."
So what Birdman is trying to address here is something I talked about in my video, Language of Appeasement. This phenomenon is a very real thing and it is disgusting, but not for the reasons that Birdman will issue here. Language of appeasement occurs when someone, unbidden, apologizes for making a comment they believe will be perceived as bigoted. The problem with language of appeasement is that it affirms one is even guilty of those thoughts and feelings in the first place. Language of appeasement only bolsters such ideas as inherent white guilt and victim group identities. Now, as a side note, although my commentary here is mostly focused on Birdman, I hold no deference for Critical Drinker. And much of Critical Drinker's own rhetoric does indeed affirm a white guilt state of mind, and an incessant need to apologize for perceived racism. It's built into Drinker's language, and I've seen it come out in spurts, such as his review of God of War Ragnarok.
There also seems to be this weird implication floating around that Ragnarok is somehow a woke game, and honestly, I just don't get it. Either I'm missing something that other people are clearly seeing, or they might be projecting things that aren't actually there. I never once got the feeling that the game was trying to crowbar in some clumsy and inappropriate political ideology to its story, or elevate certain characters at the expense of others. Yeah, female characters like Freya and Thrud are depicted as powerful warriors that can hold their own even against someone like Kratos. The only thing I could possibly come up with that people might take issue with is Angrboda, who looks a bit out of place in a story that's all about Norse mythology, but in the context of interdimensional realm travel, wildly exotic landscapes, cultures, different races, and even species, a few characters with different skin tones is probably the least unusual thing you're gonna see. And it's not like she's even used to make some awkward point about contemporary social issues. She's just a character who's there to fill you in on some backstory, and that's pretty much it. I guess my point here is that while it's important to call out divisive identity politics in media, it doesn't mean that it exists everywhere. And if you start trying to find it where it doesn't really exist, it just becomes a witch hunt that spoils your enjoyment of stuff you might otherwise end up loving.
In fact, Birdman's issuance here that apologetic language isn't good enough is one of the many reasons why this appeasement doesn't work.
We know that doesn't actually work as a defense because we have actual history of slave owners falling in love with their slaves and that male sexists still love their female family members.
White people are and will always be racist bigots in the eyes of these people, and the only manner of winning that game is not to play it. In reality, racism is just one in a long line of methods of pattern recognition and objective observation. And my evidence for that is Birdman's own video citing demographics.
Most rich people in our society tend to be white men. The Riddler was going after police officers and politicians, and again, in our society, they tend to be white.
There is no such thing as race.
And the only manner by which you can even acknowledge these demographics is if you also observe there are group differences in the first place. It stands to reason then that if you are making a passive observation about a particular race, why would anyone be obliged to apologize for being racist beforehand? And even if one grants the line is drawn when one disparages a particular race, that still begs the question what that disparity is based on. If one observes a particular demographic is repeatedly stealing bottles of Don Julio tequila from a liquor store, that observation is known as pattern recognition. Racism is not inherently wrong. It only becomes wrong when your discernment is baseless, not when you are recognizing behaviors that are repeatedly exhibited by a people of a particular race.
But when you have sustained and consistent campaigns against certain groups of people, it's entirely reasonable to suggest you have a dislike for those groups.
So is Birdman alleging there are sustained and consistent campaigns against certain groups of people? Well, here I thought he was just exposing a critic.
Less important, but still worth a mention, I'm not doing this out of jealousy or an attempt to clout chase. I've been calling out a much bigger YouTuber for nearly 7 years. For me, this is simply calling out another bad critic.
But now the commentary has veered into conspiracy theories? And by the way, doesn't YouTube have a policy against that? What is YouTube's policy called? Oh right, misinformation.
He is absolutely rich with misinformation.
Now, unlike actual fandom did, Birdman isn't making a call to action against anyone, but even so, he is projecting the idea that Drinker isn't just a dude running a channel. No, somehow Drinker represents something far larger. Next blurb is Birdman says that because Drinker thinks Gina Carano was miscast, that's evidence that he doesn't like her. And then Birdman uses that as confirmation bias that Critical Drinker hates women. And through that lens of projection, he believes Drinker is being hypocritical when he talks about what literally happened to Gina Carano when she was fired from The Mandalorian show.
Let's examine one of the most egregious cases of Will's attempts at plausible deniability. On January 5th, 2020, Drinker uploaded a video about The Mandalorian. In it, he had this to say about Gina Carano.
But for the life of me, I'll never understand why they cast Gina Carano. I mean, she's big and burly, and she obviously knows what she's doing when it comes to
Now, I won't
fight.
play the entire drinker clip here for the sake of brevity. Just know that Birdman does, and I assume that Birdman did so because he thought it was proving something. If anything, Birdman's coverage of this story will have the opposite of its intended effect. Regardless of how critical Drinker may or may not feel about Gina Carano doesn't even matter because he had nothing to do with her being fired. That was all Disney's doing, and Disney fired her on behalf of perceived harm done to an alleged victim group. And what's funny there and Birdman doesn't acknowledge is that Disney did this without regard to Gina's group identity. Instead, Gina was regarded as an individual. What this means is that Disney gave themselves permission to be sexist when it came to Gina, but not regarding protecting whatever identity group Gina was supposed to have offended. But that's not even at the root of why she was fired. This Fifth Republic form of governance calls for compliance based on your moral state of mind. Gina was essentially fired because she would not comply with a moral mandate. And that's admirable. Nobody should be called to conform to a morality that tells you not to offend a group identity. Current year ideology sets everyone at the edge of a knife where the powers that be can just pick and choose whether to regard you as a group or an individual. And that all should lead one to wonder where the through line is. But it doesn't exist because the goalposts are in constant motion.
He spoke about this person like she was a dog, outright saying she can't even act.
So it's a hardline choice between Gina is a good actress or Drinker is sexist. Roger that. What a nuanced, factual, scientific take there.
The only side I'm on is reason, logic, facts, science, and math. So believe me.
Remember, I'm very scientifically minded. Like, this is my whole thing is science, facts, logic, reason.
Beyond that, we have the projection of conspiracy theories.
But as soon as she spouts nonsense and conspiracy theories...
See, it's not a conspiracy theory to Birdman when he associates Critical Drinker with an invisible cabal.
But when you have sustained and consistent campaigns against certain groups of people...
But when it's Gina saying what exactly? What did Birdman even specify was the conspiracy theory here?
But as soon as she spouts nonsense and conspiracy theories and gets fired for her troubles...
What? Fired for her troubles? Birdman can't even articulate what she was fired for. But notice again that Birdman is fixated on Drinker, who is really only proffering his opinions from afar while Gina suffered directly at the hands of Disney. But is Birdman mouthing off at Disney for being sexist for firing a woman? No, because in Birdman's eyes, she stopped being her identity group as soon as she stopped towing the party line.
I am not a political type. I rarely, if ever, bring up politics.
You need to take this into account alongside all of Birdman's talking about projection because the only projection going on here is from himself. He completely overlooks a story about a woman being fired from Disney for having her own opinions. Meanwhile, he's trying to play victim's advocate for Gina Carano as a woman when Critical Drinker has the audacity to say she isn't a good actress.
But for the life of me, I'll never understand why they cast Gina Carano. I mean, she's big.
Oh, and there's emojis on my screen. Well, that's a very good addition, Birdman. Thank you for telling me exactly how I ought to feel about what's going on. I was confused for a moment.
It's almost as painful as watching Brie Larson trying to be funny.
This man is shameless. If it isn't obvious by now, he has a clear political agenda, and this colors his work. I am not a political type. I rarely, if ever, bring up politics.
Oh, I guess that's true. Drinker didn't spend the first 3 minutes of his video telling his audience he didn't have a political agenda, like Birdman did. Which means I don't know what to think anymore. Alas, if only Drinker would tell me what my opinion should be before he started speaking.
Speaking of agendas, the Barbie movie and his subsequent analysis evaporated any hope I had left for this man's integrity.
Barbie is like the deformed, mutated rage child of Captain Marvel, Ghostbusters 2016, and She-Hulk. It is pure brain cancer in movie form, and I was genuinely shocked by the sheer, undisguised contempt this film has towards 50% of the human population.
Yes!
And that should be Birdman's response. Everything Drinker says here contains no actual information about anything that happens in this movie. This is wholly and utterly his own subjective take, which needs no other rebuttal other than maybe his wife caressing his head saying, "There, there." Instead, Birdman tries to fact-check Drinker's emotional reaction to the film. Is this real?
How could he have possibly come to that conclusion for the film's marketing? It was plainly obvious that Margot's Barbie was the main character.
None of what Drinker said was worth responding to. This is pathetically spiteful.
He's been caught changing the titles of his videos after a media property releases to hide his terrible perception of marketing material.
So this is one point of criticism that both Birdman and actual fandom have about Drinker, which I agree on. Comics Matter with your boy Zach has also been keen on noticing this as well. And I have yet to hear a good counter argument for why Drinker does this.
On one of Drinker's live streams, he attributed a false quote to Isabella Merced about the failure of Madame Web.
Some of the stars of the film have got theories about why that is, and one of them is right here. Isabella Merced? Is that the word? Merced?
Sure. Yeah.
She said it failed for one simple reason. For the same reason that the Marvels or Bird of Prey failed, because the male audience still hides a deep contempt for everything that is starring strong, independent women.
Oh, God. The truth is the truth, I guess.
Sure. I mean, that's definitely the reason Birds of Prey failed and the Marvels. It wasn't because they were bad films that no one wanted. For sure.
Isabella was, of course, inundated with hate from parrots that took these quotes at face value because why would grifters lie to them? She then had to come out and deny these clearly false allegations, but by then, the damage was already done.
Well, this is actually good criticism. And from what I can tell, the original video was removed from YouTube as well. So yes, very good, very interesting. And again, drawing from the latent criticism of your boy Zach, who granted tends to become a bit unhinged himself, Critical Drinker's Sloptube antics make themselves incredibly obvious at times. Now, what doesn't make sense to me is that Drinker is doing YouTube full time and his reviews are not very long. So in my mind, there's no excuse for this, and no apology from him only services to perpetuate an image of a personal anti-woke crusade where any collateral damage is to be damned. So my compliments to Birdman for keeping a record of this and bringing this to my attention. See, this is good YouTube. This is good content. Straightforward, with facts. And he didn't even need to—
He has a vested interest in seeing the culture war proliferate in media discourse.
Oh, well, that didn't last long, did it?
This shows the lack of research and effort he puts into his work. No discernment, no ability to perform an investigation, and hastily attributes an obviously fake quote in a concerted effort to confirm his biases. Why would you take anything he says seriously at this point?
Whatever conflict Birdman has conjured in his head is all the explanation he needs for what the Critical Drinker is doing is profitable. Critical Drinker profits off reactionary content. And the terminology I used beforehand was that this is all psychopolitical. The way this works is that Critical Drinker gives his viewers a cushion against people like Birdman and other progressive types who are constantly imposing themselves on modern media and modern media discourse. Drinker provides his viewers with a mental bulwark against ideological warfare. And the funny thing about that is he exists in part because people want a refuge from the deluge of woke media. People want someone out there who says that they notice what's going on. Granted, this all works on perception rather than reality because a conman is only able to take advantage of you as far as your ignorance goes. Hence, changing YouTube thumbnails or praising the gay in HBO's The Last of Us, or initially praising Amazon's Fallout show, or telling his audience not to notice Sweet Baby Ink's woke meddling in God of War Ragnarok.
This is not the first time he's been caught manipulating a narrative. The YouTuber Pillar of Garbage exposed Drinker for lying about scenes in Glass Onion because Drinker has a political gripe with Rian Johnson, the director of Glass Onion, and The Last Jedi, a film he and his ilk have pilloried for the past 7 years because of perceived wokeness. Here's a clip.
The example Drinky gives for Rian Johnson's blatant rewriting is the scene where Blanc and, as we later see, Helen spot Duke's voyeurism.
Batista's watching his girlfriend supposedly having an affair with Miles only to be observed by Blanc. Now look at the later version of this exact same scene. Noticed how Helen's been added in here when she totally should have been visible before.
Except no, that isn't true. There's a reason the Drinker plays these clips on mute. Let me put the sound back on for you. That was the first time we see this. There's a close shot of Duke, then we hear the twig snap, and then we pull back to a shot revealing Blanc. Here's the scene as we're shown it later on. We We start with this slightly wider shot, revealing Blanc and Helen, then Helen leaves, causing that sound, and Duke turns round. This point is the moment we saw earlier on, and there's a very obvious, very obtrusive sound cue, the sole purpose of which is to communicate precisely this.
Why would Drinker do that? Is he incompetent, or is he a blatant liar?
I go with both. I suspect Drinker pulls clips online without checking their authenticity and reacts to them in such a way that conforms to the consensus of his viewers. But that's just my opinion, and my opinion doesn't matter.
These are the only two choices you have, and both of them are damning for his reputation. And yet, he doesn't seem to care, because I guess his followers don't seem to care.
I agree. This is slop-tube affirmation bias for people who hate Rian Johnson. This is far less about film criticism and far more about tribal response wrangling. This is also why ER was obliged to come out of the woodwork and talk about this as well. But something else that needs to be kept in mind is that many who were obliged to praise Glass Onion also did so as a form of tribal virtue signaling. That is what's really going on here. The main motivation to praise or mock films right now is indeed based on provoking reactions online. And if that is our working theory, it makes sense why Drinker has not addressed this or will not apologize.
Hold still and go along, man. I'm playing through. You did?
Something else I picked up on with Birdman's commentary is that he called Drinker here instead of Will.
Why would Drinker do that?
This is worth pointing out because the way Birdman is addressing this faux pas is very parasocial. What would be enough is making the point that Drinker is dishonest and leaving it at that. It's up to the viewers to decide, right? Just wash your hands and be done with it. There's no helping anyone who doesn't want to be helped. But no, Birdman continues.
These are the only two choices you have, and both of them are damning for his reputation.
They're only damning for his reputation if his reputation suffers. But you see what Birdman is doing here is showing his hand. See, why would he even care about Drinker's reputation at all? Just expose him and be done with it, right?
I'm not doing this out of jealousy or an attempt to clout chase. For me, this is simply calling out another bad critic.
But no, it's not enough. What Birdman is showing here is that he is not unbiased at all. He very clearly does not like what Drinker is doing, and he doesn't like the influence that Drinker has.
Both of them are damning for his reputation. The Barbie movie and his subsequent analysis evaporated any hope I had left for this man's integrity. Why would you take anything he says seriously at this point?
He made this video specifically because he wants Drinker's reputation to suffer.
Look at this tweet from Star Wars Holocron. They are very obviously making the point that sometimes a show's first season isn't always where it finally ends up, with a couple examples including The Clone Wars and Breaking Bad. When Will saw this, how do you fail at understanding the point this hard?
Yeah, true. Technically, this is misrepresenting the point being made, but this was also an easy win for Drinker in this case, because the point being made is not a good one, because it establishes a straw man. So yeah, you can quibble about the fact that Drinker mischaracterized a straw man, but it's still a straw man.
This is one of two things. He either understands the point being made, but is attempting to misrepresent the point to, again, galvanize an already volatile audience against a contentious product, thereby sending his parrots to harass this account, which actually fucking happened.
And again, this is conspiratorial language, which, again, I'm almost certain YouTube has policies against. So show me the receipts, Birdman. Show me definitive proof that Critical Drinker is making a call to action against people on X.
His Twitter alone is an embarrassment of narrative pushes from platform-boosting known anti-black racists like Kang Min Lee.
There is no such thing as race.
To even shit-talking PETA, because he perceives them to be left-wing, I guess? I don't know, that last one was just amusing to me. I am not a political type. I rarely, if ever, bring up politics. What this person does is not honest critique. He looks for ways he can jimmy in alt-right political talking points under the guise of being a movie reviewer.
Anyone worth their weight in the alt-rightosphere would know that Critical Drinker has praised the gay in HBO's The Last of Us.
Yeah, I think we were all very impressed, from that technical aspect of capturing the look and feel of the games, giving that mature, somber tone that you expected from the games. I think that aspect of it they really nailed. And I think probably episode 3 was an example of, hey, there's ways you can deviate from the narrative of the games and still produce a good end product. You know, it's something that's emotionally satisfying and tells a really good story. You know, they, like you say, they extrapolated from it a little bit, and you know, it meant changing things around a little bit so that certain characters weren't around anymore when Joel and Ellie show up. But I think ultimately you got a pretty satisfying story out of that episode. So yeah, I very much came down on the side of really enjoying it. I think that was the most like emotionally invested I was in the show out of all 3 episodes so far. More so even than episode 1, which really surprised me. But I think it comes down to that combination of the writing. The acting's really good.
The 3rd episode has a runtime of about 70 minutes. Somewhere around 55 of those are dedicated to Bill meeting Frank and then falling in love and living out a homosexual fantasy in the apocalypse. The two spend their days eating steak and drinking wine in Bill's compound as the world around them burns. Frank eventually gets cancer and is going to die, so he and Bill drink poison and commit together. Then Joel and Ellie find them dead inside their house.
And as far as I know, the alt-right take a hardline stance against any forms of sexual degeneracy. In addition, we know that Drinker initially praised Amazon's Fallout show, which promotes miscegenation and forced diversity, among other things, and I'm pretty sure the alt-right has very candid opinions about that. And lastly, Drinker outright tells his audience to stop noticing woke shit in God of War Ragnarok, like how a Norse goddess is a young black girl. I can tell you for certain that the alt-right will not take kindly to any revisionism of white culture based on Norse mythology. Now, I will grant that if you are alt-right and you don't know any better, many of these things may fly past your radar. But the fact of the matter is that Drinker is very obviously not alt-right, and his cozying up to folks like Ben Shapiro is even a further indication that he is far more progressive than his regular viewers realize.
They'll make a movie from the 80s, but they'll just remake it with a different skin. But there's no heart in it because it's not original. You know exactly what... You can see the moves before they're making the moves. Have you seen anything creative coming out of Hollywood recently?
And yes, right-wingers can be progressive too. That's why the alt-right even exists in the first place.
He's not a film reviewer. He's a political ideologue that complains almost exclusively about mainstream media to push rhetoric.
No, the grift is not to push rhetoric. If you believe that, then you've taken the bait and you're just part of the con. The grift is to bandwagon rhetoric to con others into thinking that you are pushing rhetoric. Doing this repeatedly turns it into Sloptube and essentially devalues that rhetoric. And that, in my estimation, is the goal, and is primarily my issue with Drinker and channels like his. So Birdman does bring up good points about how Drinker is becoming more inconsistent with his movie reviews as he tries to adhere to the consensus of his audience. But something Birdman does not talk about is the fact that Drinker is working the parasocial angle when he specifies that he is going to listen to what the audience has to say.
So, it was off to Rotten Tomatoes for me to check out the reviews. Not the critic reviews, of course, because nobody in their right mind gives a shit what those fucking shills have got to say about anything anymore. I'm talking about the audience reviews, which is the only semi-reliable barometer for quality these days.
Even so, this doesn't change what Drinker's channel has become at this point in time.
Besides the fact that TV show reviews on Rotten Tomatoes aren't verified, meaning they are subject to review bombs, why doesn't he keep this same energy with, I don't know, The Marvels, Black Widow, or Quantumania, movies that have pretty good audience scores? Seems like Drinker is the living embodiment of this meme, doesn't it?
What Drinker does, what Birdman does, and even what my channel does, is provide viewers with a cushion against assailing ideological forces. You see, right now, YouTube has become a realm of cheerleaders and street performers. Realize that analogy. This whole thing is about dropping coins into a pan owned by a dude playing a piano at the street corner. And the grift is that the performer is dressed like Donald Trump and wearing a MAGA hat. That's really all there is to it. And then when someone starts hooping and hollering in anger from afar, that will only ensure that more and more people gather round and toss even more coins into the pan. And even if this street performer would love to regale his listeners with the wonders of Bach, of Liszt, of Mozart, of Beethoven, he knows that's not where the money is.
Of course he'll never come out and say, I don't want to see black people in lead roles, or I'm tired of female protagonists, like The Quartering stupidly did. It's because being that he's selling something, he has something to lose, so he has to communicate in dog whistles to maintain the facade of plausible deniability.
In reference to Birdman's alleged high IQ, Attributing plausible deniability to what Drinker says or does is intellectually dishonest. Regardless of what Drinker or the Quartering or anyone else believes in, we know that we are all under the unsteady eyes of a societal panopticon, and therefore we need to structure all our wording in a way that conforms to that society, lest we be outcast. And the reason I know what Birdman is saying here is intellectually dishonest is because he too knows how the game is played.
Monkey dances and monkey noises.
He just the blatant racism. I wonder if this video is going to get yellow dollar signs. It's probably gonna get demonetized for this because, like, holy fuck, he just said that black people are doing monkey noises and monkey like come on, bruv.
This clip is taken from a much longer video where Birdman felt obligated to respond to the Smudcast, a podcast hosted by the YouTube channel Smudboy. The Smudcast covers a variety of media on YouTube, primarily other YouTubers who talk about media. And as you can see here, Birdman is well aware of certain things that you can or cannot say on social media, or you run the risk of being punished. Censorship is so widespread that people have to be very selective and careful about what they say or promote so as not to trip these alarm bells. So the situation is not as clear-cut as not saying the quiet part aloud. The fact is that we know there are stipulations in place that punish people for saying certain things, and so, therefore, workarounds are inevitable.
And Will, I know you're watching, so let me finally address you directly. Film reviews are not your personal soapbox to air out your grievances with minority groups and those that advocate for them. It's irresponsible to your, my, and every other audience that consumes film and teaches them nothing about the art form.
Oh, this is just silly. The dude's channel name is The Critical Drinker, and he plays the role of a drunk, rambling about films. You might as well be heckling Warner Brothers for saying Bugs Bunny doesn't give you an accurate depiction of what real rabbits are like. The Critical Drinker is not a real critic. He is an entertainer. He plays a character. This is a performance, and anyone who watches his channel is free not to watch his channel. Anyone subscribed to his channel is free to unsubscribe. You remember when Birdman said he didn't make this video because he was jealous? Well, he wouldn't be talking about Drinker's influence if he wasn't jealous. And remember, based on a lot of what he says in posts, Birdman is absolutely fixated on his own intellectual capacity.
What's up, Doc? Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Wile E. Coyote. Genius. Now, don't try to get away. I am more muscular, more cunning, faster, and larger than you are, and I'm a genius, while you could hardly pass the entrance examinations to kindergarten.
And here in this video, he makes an underhanded quip about Drinker's own IQ.
I mean, the alternative is to suggest he's low IQ, and I would never do that.
This is about jealousy. This got me thinking it must burn him up something fierce knowing someone like Critical Drinker has more influence than he does. That was also projected by his mentioning how Drinker's reputation was at stake somehow. Except that reputation, according to Birdman, is built into Drinker being a critic. But that has not and has never been the case. Drinker is an entertainer. Go back to my analogy. This is about being a street performer who puts on a costume that causes people like Birdman to seethe and rage. And that, in and of itself, is also entertaining. And in the long run, it doesn't really matter if Drinker knows what that costume means and what side effects it may or may not have in the hearts and minds of others, because in the end, the result is still monetary gain.
If you're good at something, never do it for free.
And the best way I've heard this put was by one glib facsimile who said that for people like Birdman, it's not about being on the right side of history. They're incensed at being on the losing side of money. Inspiration for this entire video began when Birdman covered the Smudcast, some of whose members I am acquainted with. And after having sat through and listened to hours of content between the Smudcast and Birdman's response video, I arrived at this piece, which I believe encapsulates everything.
What are they selling? Like this is the thing. If it's AdSense, well, you've got the same problem there, buddy. Everyone on YouTube is using AdSense if they want to. Is that it? Because I don't care what you put through that air through that hole in your mouth. If you're all saying stuff and we're all making money, what's the difference?
Notice here he paused the smudcast mid-sentence. It's something he repeatedly says he is frustrated with when the smudcast does that to his video, but as we can see here, he's got no problem doing it himself. And if Birdman had an ounce of self-awareness, he'd have probably abandoned this entire project given how much he ridicules the smudcast for this format. And yet he continues to act on that format here, and stretched what probably could have been said in half an hour to 2 hours. And in trying to format a response to Smudboy here, he goes on and on about nothing. He also does this with his comments on YouTube, by the way. The didactics must have really screwed with his brain. Whenever he is confronted with anything that challenges him, he almost welcomes the paradox and issues some variation of unmerited impossibility. In other words, it isn't happening, and it's good that it's happening. There's even an unbroken admission within this very response video where he straight up asserts that someone in the smudcast is racist. And then immediately after saying that, he tells himself there's no such thing as race. And then he shrugs and says he's going to use the word anyway.
If a black person appearing on screen does not feel good or feel right for you, you're probably a racist. I don't like the word because, like I said, there's no such thing as race, or there is a human race, right? But like, it's the best word that we have, and that's what I'm going to use. Yeah, you're probably just a racist.
That's essentially how he handles all of his contradictions. He explains them away as if that somehow alleviates the contradiction, and then just continues to make whatever point he was trying to make in the first place. Notice, however, in his responding to Smudboy, he doesn't get to a point. To steelman one of Smudboy's main contentions here, Smudboy does not understand why Birdman is upset about Critical Drinker's capacity to make money through his YouTube content.
Are you lying? Okay, are you selling something? If they're not selling anything and you're not selling anything, where's the grift?
And so the basic question there is, what is a grifter? And why should we be upset about that? What follows is Birdman struggling to find words. He goes through talking about how he thought everyone should know what the word means, but then eventually he figures he might as well define it. And then in trying to define it, he struggles and has to refer to the amazing atheist who also used it in reference to the Critical Drinker. Eventually he arrives at something resembling a definition, content that generates outrage.
What they are selling is outrage. Again, I provide examples that you won't even let me get to, but an example of a media grifter is somebody who looks at other people and go, okay, well, they're talking about, wokeness in video games and movies and stuff like that, and they're getting a lot of views, they're making a lot of money. So let me try to get in on that. And what they'll do is they'll start making the same types of videos with the same types of thumbnails, and their entire personality online, will be this thing. So like you go to their Twitter and every fucking tweet, like they're not tweeting about their day, they're not tweeting about the latest film that they saw. Like, oh, here's the things I like about this movie. They're tweeting, well, look at what Anita Sarkeesian said. Look at this woke propaganda in this thing. Here we go again. Ugly female character in a game. There's a fat black woman in the Minecraft movie. Like, that's what I'm talking about. They're selling outrage. Everything they post is an attempt to get people mad about something. And because they're the ones pointing it out, well, now you have to come to me. You have to come to me to get that news, to get that information that you're mad about. Yeah, come to me. I will tell you the truth. So then they click on your videos, and then you start earning money, and you start getting influence, and you start getting power. That's a media grifter. That's what they do.
Even here, however, Birdman makes no connection between the definition of the word and outrage content in general. And although my opinion doesn't matter, my determination here is that Birdman's inability to establish a reason is wholly because searching for that answer would call for some earnest self-reflection. Birdman's content itself has also relied on much of social media's outrage culture, and I wonder if, to some extent, he too realizes that, but is far too consumed with all the mantras of identity politics to listen to his own conscience anymore. At any rate, that's enough for me. The rest of this video is a gift for the smudcast. Enjoy.
I got them. They're going off on complete and utter tangents about other things that are not the focus of this video. Got them. So right there it says, Th3Birdman will probably make a response to this. Guy has a very fragile ego. I wonder why they always say ego when I respond to you. Like, am I not allowed to respond? Like, okay, I'm arguing against something these people believe. They responded to me. Does that mean that they have a fragile ego? Why is it only Big Bad Birdman, when I do a thing that these people are doing to me? That's just, I never get that. That's just a little thing. But yeah, it's something I see over and over. The guy has a fragile ego. Actually, I really don't. I really don't. I let a lot of shit slide, dude. Like a lot of shit. Oh God. I don't, listen, as a Black American, I take offense to someone with an accent like yours trying to explain woke. You don't know what woke means. You really need to shut the absolute fuck up. The guy has a fragile ego. Actually, I really don't. I really don't. I let a lot of shit slide, dude. Like a lot of shit. You really need to shut the absolute fuck up.
Did he just mention the parents of the grifters, quote unquote? What do they have to do with this?
Nothing, you idiot. I said parrots. Parrot. Parrot, not parents. I take offense to that because, like, I take great pride in my diction. The guy has a fragile ego. Actually, I really don't. I take offense to that because, like, I take great pride in my diction. The guy has a fragile ego. It's something that comes in handy as a voice actor, which I am. So whenever I'm behind a mic, I am taking my time when speaking. The guy has a fragile ego. I speak in a way that's like measured and in control. Like there's a specific cadence that I let a lot of shit slide, dude. Like a lot of shit. So it's a technique that voice actors use, and I'm using it very. I let a lot of shit slide, dude. Like a lot of shit. I got them. They're going off on complete and utter tangents about other things that are not the focus of this video. Got him. I said he was Indian in the video. You think I'm putting out like inaccurate information in my videos? You think I would do that? A person who calls out people for putting inaccurate information out into the internet. You think I would do that? The guy has a fragile ego. Actually, I really don't.
With the game that isn't out, that a whole nation despises.
Ooh, you're just wrong. The guy has a fragile ego. Actually, I really don't. And the comments, man, they just, I love the chat right now. Blanca deserves more respect. Motherfucker, do you know who I am? You're looking at the #1 Blanca player on PlayStation in the world. The guy has a fragile ego. Actually, I really don't. So for you to sit here and suggest that Blanca deserves more respect, well, you're looking at the respect, motherfucker. I am Blanca. I got him. They're going off on complete and utter tangents about other things that are not the focus of this video. Got him. I let a lot of shit slide, dude. Like a lot of shit. See the hypocrisy here? Yeah, I do. Woke means to be aware. Here's another stupid fucking colloquialism. Pattern recognition. These people think they're the only people that notice patterns. Well, we're noticing patterns about you. Hence, the parrots on the screen right now. Pattern recognition is something that is ingrained into the human DNA. It's a biological thing. You're biologically predisposed to seeing patterns, especially patterns that aren't there. Well, we're noticing patterns about you, patterns that aren't there. Woke means to be aware. You're biologically predisposed to seeing patterns, especially patterns that aren't there. Well, we're noticing patterns about you, meaning it's not an observable fact. Well, we're noticing patterns about you. Hence, the parrots on the screen right now. See the hypocrisy here? Yeah, I do.
Yeah, but that's an homage. Doesn't mean that's the theme or the focus.
My dude, this right here is exactly why you let someone's full point play out before you pause.
And with the problem with Drinker is that
we don't care. This right here is exactly why you let someone's full point play out.
Yeah, I think that would you remember like the Twitter stuff.
Oh my God! Can we just get to my video, please? I don't want to do politics. This right here is exactly why you let someone's full point play out. What a fucking stupid example. I'm skipping this.
All right.
All right. Yeah. And I remember the whole they banned the mod that removes the.
All right. These guys are clearly gooners. They want pornographic mods in games. I really don't care about this topic, so let's skip forward here. This right here is exactly why you let someone's full point play out.
And some of these
like
people are
Kanye
grifting because they use the word without defining it. Is that what they?
Holy fuck, Smud! Shut up, dude. Just shut up and let the video play. God damn! Like, has he not learned so far that there are going to be things that I say and then I explain or prove those things? Has he not learned that yet? This right here is exactly why you let someone's full point play out. And I'm skipping this part because they go into a whole spiel about like misunderstanding what I said. It's not important. I don't really feel like I need to respond to this. Stupid. Let's skip ahead because these guys are so fucking stupid. It beggars belief. Bro, shut up and let it play. Shut the fuck up and listen to what happens first and then respond. See the hypocrisy here? Yeah, I do. If a black person appearing on screen does not feel good or feel right for you, you're probably a racist. I don't like the word because, like I said, there's no such thing as race, or there is a human race, right? But like, it's the best word that we have, and that's what I'm going to use. Yeah, you're probably just a racist. See the hypocrisy here? Yeah, I do. He might be in the industry because of DEI is a ridiculous fucking take, and exactly the thing that I'm arguing against, and exactly what that fucking weirdo with the accent that I can't place said earlier. Yeah, you're probably just a racist. That's the fucking point of this.
The question with these things is always, how many other things have you seen?
And again, that's a question that is easily answered by doing the most cursory research you could on me. Like, do a little bit of research, because like I don't know any of these guys. I know the Smud boy, Smud, whatever the fuck. That's the only one I know by name. The other three I don't know. See the hypocrisy here? Yeah, I do. So this is the role that they're casting for. This is Dr. Bob, 50 to 60-year-old white man. If you're not in that age range, if you're not white, if you're not a man, don't apply to this role.
English, motherfucker, do you speak it?
Yeah.
So you understand the words I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
This is yeah, I wouldn't apply to this. Well, first of all, I don't fit the demographic that they're asking for, but
well, what I'm saying is that there are known knowns and that there are known unknowns, but there's also unknown unknowns. Things we don't know that we don't know.
Like, this is my area. Japan. I know that sounds weird coming from a black American. Yeah, you're probably just a racist. Nike does not have any symbolism of the Greek goddess anymore, or ever. Like, there's no symbol. The Nike check is not a Greek goddess symbol. So, Nike has a hijab. That's haram because, like, in the past, the word Nike meant a Greek goddess. Like, shut the fuck up, you fucking idiot. Remember, I'm very scientifically minded. Like, this is my whole thing is science, facts, logic, reason. A Greek goddess.
What's a demographic that steals Nike shoes constantly? It's usually the people that vote for the woke stuff.
Yeah,
he's very clearly demonstrating that he's a racist. There is no such thing as race. This would have been one of the Hitler Youth. This German guy, if he was born in the 1920s or the 1910s, he'd have definitely been one of the Hitler Youth. Yeah, you're probably just a racist. Oh, well, the word woke has changed meaning. Yeah, so did the word woman, guys. You don't like that one, though. You don't like that.
So,
oh God. I don't listen. As a black American, I take offense to someone with an accent like yours trying to explain woke. You don't know what woke means. You really need to shut the absolute fuck up. You don't like that one, though. You don't like that. See the hypocrisy here? Yeah, I do.
Like, look here. The second sentence has the word racial injustice. which leads to racial justice.
You don't like that one, though. You don't like that. Remember, I'm very scientifically minded. Like, this is my whole thing is science, facts, logic, reason. Racist. That says beginning in the 2010s, it came to be used as slang for a broader awareness of social inequalities, such as racial injustice, right? Social inequalities, such as racial injustice, right? I got them. They're going off on complete and utter tangents about other things that are not the focus of this video. Got them. You don't like that one, though. This is how white people started using it. Remember, this is our word. Read the first fucking thing right there. Woke is an adjective derived from African American vernacular English, originally meaning alertness to racial prejudice and discrimination. In the 2010s, you guys took it and bastardized it. That's what this article is saying. Go down a little bit further. The phrase "stay woke" has been present in AAVE since the 1930s. It's actually a little older than that. But let's go with the 1930s. 1930s. Now, we're about 5 years away from 2030. Are any of you close to 100 years old? No? That means this word predates you. It has been used for almost 100 years in a particular context, and you guys took it and bastardized it. That's the point here. I'm showing this because I'm correctly. You don't like that one, though.
If you ask any German to translate racial justice,
no one cares what Germans think. Yeah, you're probably just a racist because this word is an American colloquialism. So who gives a shit what you think? Skip. Bro, shut up and let it play. Black people have a culture, right? We had to develop it because we were forced here. My ancestors were forced here against their will. That's how culture happens, dude.
It's a culture which didn't do whites any good, and it's certainly not doing blacks any good today. And the tragedy is that people regard this culture as somehow the authentic black culture, and therefore you're not to interfere with it.
You have enclaves of similar people, and they start to speak similarly. They start to have similar foods. They start do certain things. That's culture.
It reminds me of a scene in the Blue Max where this general is encouraging this daredevil pilot to do all kinds of wild stunts, you see, knowing that the guy's going to kill himself if he keeps doing this, and therefore the general will be rid of a political problem.
That's culture. White people.
That's not even.
I love the German is trying to fucking tell the Black American about Black American English. I love that. That's amazing. The guy has a fragile ego. Actually, I really don't. No. Yes, motherfucker. Yes. That's our word. We created that. The guy has a fragile ego. Actually, I really don't. White people. You dig what I'm saying? This just doesn't make sense. This guy trying to tell me what the fuck the word woke means. It's insane. I let a lot of shit slide, dude. Like a lot of shit. White people. A place like China is ethnically homogenous. They have, and again, I've been to places that are ethnically homogenous. I've gone to Japan so many times that people think I live there now. An ethnically homogenous country has a very simplistic view of the world. Yeah, you're probably just a racist. It takes a very special person living in a homogenous country to not be that way. Yeah, you're probably just a racist. I wouldn't necessarily lean to racism. I wouldn't go, oh, they're racist because they're, it would be a very nuanced conversation. And I think that that's something that gets lost in these things. White people, like I said, I have personal experience with people that are from homogenous countries. And I know the way that they look at the world is based on media. Yeah, you're probably just a racist. So yeah, I wouldn't immediately go they're racist or sexist or whatever. It would be a very nuanced conversation, and I would have to look at each individual case as a case by case. White people, and I have to see where they're going with the Nike thing. Like, what is the argument here? Like, please.
Yeah.
Okay, what is it? Oh, Nike stock surges.
That's in 2018.
Is it?
That was 6 years.
What is it being 6 years ago have to do with anything? Bro, shut up and let it play. Shut the fuck up and listen to what happens first and then respond. You remember, he asked, why is Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers a clown? This is why. He said this is the worst thing that they could do. This is a bad move. This is get woke, go broke. That's what he said. I then show the evidence that the opposite happened. Their stock price went up because of hiring Colin Kaepernick for that campaign. This is the causation correlation dichotomy. You don't have actual evidence. It's on the screen. Nike stock price reaches all-time high after Colin Kaepernick ad. It's on the fucking screen. That's what I'm showing. This is the causation correlation dichotomy. You don't have actual evidence.
And that looks like, oh look, there was a slump and then it got up. Can I see the other stuff further left?
As soon as you hit 20,
this is just a recovery.
Yeah, but as soon
So you want to cherry pick an example that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Why are you trying to look at an example of them not doing the thing that we're talking about? If you go to the left, what would that prove? I can tell you guys did not do well in science or math class. That is blatantly obvious to me. These women were the scientists and mathematicians that helped us get to the moon. But they're side characters? Side characters? Well, guess what then? That is probably why there's a movie made about them. Because they were hidden. Yeah, this was during a time where racism was really rampant and there was Jim Crow laws and, segregation. And yet and still, these people help send man to the moon. That seems like a story worth telling, don't it? You are beyond a piece of shit. You're not even a piece of shit anymore. You're diarrhea. Black Americans are originally from Africa. We were from West Africa, the vast majority of us. Some of us are a little bit from, some of East Africa, some of Central Africa as well. But the majority of us here, our ancestors are from West Africa. There's a reason why, these guys are where they are. They're not good at this. They don't know what they're talking about. They hate facts and evidence. They love their little bubble that they live in where everything woke fails and they don't even know what woke is. But, so for you people, it's never talent. It's always some fucking agenda. And that's why I hate you motherfuckers. I can't stand you bitches. What's so insidious about you people, it's you always go black people, queer people, women, all the non-straight white male groups. Gareth literally said he wanted to make a movie on location, and the locations that he chose were all Asia. So the story obviously has to take place with Asians, and there's going to be a lot of Asian people. And then boom, the protagonist is a black guy. There is no DEI here. So yeah, this is just brain rot. And my brain is a little bit smoother for having watched it. So now I'm at 140 IQ instead of 141.
Wile E. Coyote, super genius.